I'm Kerri Hummingbird, a soul guide, and I'm so grateful to Carl for putting on this series to be in support to so many people looking for answers today. I'm grateful that I have some to offer and some wisdom to share from my own personal experience. I wasn't raised with religion. I wasn't raised in a church. My grandmother was in Midwest Texas her whole life in the Pentecostal church and going to church 5 days a week. And my mother was not resonant with that. She felt like there was incongruence between what was being taught in the church and what the actions were. And what she was picking up on is that love is action, and so when my mom raised me, she said, I'm not going to give you any of that programming, what she called programming. I'm not going to give you religious programming. I'm not going to teach you that way. I'm going to let you find out for yourself. And what that opened me to was the mystery of the divine, the mystery of this matrix that we're all living in, this God source creator, great mother matrix that we live in. And I began my exploration wondering, what is God? What am I? Am I alive? I'm breathing. I don't know who I am. And I didn't have a formal way to understand that. So I went to nature. I went outside. I loved being in nature. I went hiking. I spent as much time outdoors as I could. I also became an artist. I was very artistic. I'm designed in this lifetime as an artisan. And so I did my best to learn about the spirit, the great spirit, through art and through communing with nature. And, that got me so far. And then I turned to mankind, to humankind, civilization for psychology. I was in psychology sessions for my health and well-being, or attempt at getting to health and well-being through psychotherapy for about 20 years. And those were all steps along a pathway of understanding myself. And on that journey of psychotherapy, of course, I got diagnosed. I got diagnosed that I was crazy, that I was borderline personality disorder, and I was going to be doomed for life to be broken and just have to take these pills and do my best to be acceptable to other people. And so, on that journey of understanding myself without a construct of spirituality or God or anything to support me in that, I had to turn to what was available. And what was available was life. you know what was available was my life's experiences and how I reacted and responded to those things. And I had to learn restraint. I had to learn stillness. I had to learn how to open my heart when I wanted to close it. I had to learn how to hold back my anger and not lash out at somebody and process it in some other way. I had to learn how to let myself grieve and cry. I had to learn how to be a mother because I birthed two sons into the world, and that process alone was its own initiation by life. I had to learn how to be a mother, how to care for a little being that was dependent upon me, and how to contend with my own inspirations and my own ideas about my life while also, taking care of little babies that I was responsible for making sure they stayed alive and got nourished and got well. And along that journey, my oldest son was what I call a unicorn child, and he had a lot of darkness inside of him right from the beginning, just a lot of really challenging things that he was facing. He had a hard time blending in and conforming and getting along. And so along this journey was a lot of lessons around following your own path, learning what's true for you, turning to the inside. And for most of my life, until I had my spiritual awakening, I was trying to do what other people told me was the right thing to do, which is kind of like what church does, right? It tells you what to do to have a successful life, but it's somebody else's formula. It's not your formula. It's not your true path. It's just what somebody else is offering in their best guidance, to help you get through life, maybe get through it easier than they got through it. So as I set out on this path, and with basically, tools I got from my parents, when my mom, my dad were really good advocates for me to find my way and to find a way that was true and authentic for me. I basically, was caught in that paradigm of like, do I live according to what other people say is the right thing to do that doesn't feel right for me? Or do I follow my own path and chart the course and then be called crazy and And, what do I believe? Do I believe the psychotherapist that I have a diagnosis? Do I believe that it's not okay to have emotions? Do I believe that I'm broken because I don't have a religion? Do I believe any of that? Like, what am I going to believe about myself? And that was really the question life was asking me. And I led down this path to where I had, well, you call a nervous breakdown or just a breakdown and like a letting go. And I just said, I can't do this anymore. None of this is working for me. I've done what the psychotherapist said. I've taken the medications. I've done what everybody else said was going to bring me happiness. It didn't bring me happiness. Now what? So I said, okay, well, I'm just going to go be bad. That was my solution. So, if I'm going to hell, let's just go there. So I left. I said, okay, I'm leaving my marriage. I'm leaving psychotherapy. I'm stopping taking these pills and I'm just going to see what life has to show me. And within 6 months, life brought me a spiritual mentor who sat me down and for the first time compassionately told me, you're creating this. You are creating your reality. All of this rejection you feel, all of these relationships gone awry, all of this negativity you're bringing down upon yourself. That was hard medicine. And it was so truthful. It hit me in the gut, and I knew it was true. I took the wind right out of me, and I think my chin was on the floor. And I said, oh my gosh, how do I stop doing that? That became my next question. If I'm creating my reality, how can I stop creating the reality that's bringing me suffering? And how can I start creating the reality that brings me joy, love, peace, and happiness? That became my inquiry. And of course, life always answers your questions. And so I got led to another teacher, started teaching me about the four agreements. I love this book, Damiga Ruiz. Just bless. I wish I'd had this in third grade. And I started learning in earnest. What can bring me joy? How can I use my consciousness for beneficial results in my life and others' lives? Started that path. That teacher led to another teacher, led to another teacher, another. I mean, you know the deal if you're on this path. It leads to teachers and teachers and teachers and teachers until you finally start to find your own truth inside, and you access the point of the divine inside of yourself. And so all of the teaching that I've received from all these fantastic teachers was their blueprint, was their map for how to connect with that which is greater within themselves, that which is greater, that makes all of this consciousness and this experience of life possible. That one thing that we call by so many names. It's just one thing going on here. I like to call it the giant disco ball. We're all inside the giant disco ball. We are the disco ball. And we get to look out our own little tiny window and we get to see reality through this tiny little window of the disco ball. But like, if you ever got to lean out that window and kind of sit back and look, you'd see like how many other windows there are. There's like so many windows and none of them are seeing the same thing. And we are all the same, part of that same oneness. So as I got on my path to realize that, because that's a huge discovery. Of course, I read many, many words of wisdom from Rumi, for example, who said, we are not a drop in the ocean. We have the entire ocean in a drop. And I would read these prophetic words and I would go, I want to understand this. This seems really true, but how do I get to the place where I really know that to be true and not just an idea in my head that sounds nice? So as I walked upon my path, I studied with many teachers. I did a lot of energy medicine. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's like spiritual healing. I studied from indigenous people. I learned how to do healing for myself and others. And I became a certified practitioner of shamanic healing through the Four Winds Light Body Society. I learned how to be one through Power Path, School of Shamanism. I learned Toltec wisdom and practices through Heather Ashamara, who's a protege of Don Miguel Ruiz. And now I teach the mystery school. The mystery school is life. I'm just a life teacher. That's it. I'm a guide. And I help people navigate and find their own course to their own true essence and their own true alignment and their own true vibration and the window that they're perceiving life through in this lifetime and what they're meant to do here. And I have lots of tools and processes that I help people with that. And if it serves, it serves. And I'm always happy to be in service. And I know that I'm not the only answer. Like my path is not everyone's path. I'm really aware of that. So my joy is to help people get some glimpse or insight or knowing of themselves in truth that's really authentic for them and not just like my blueprint on stamped on side their, on their package. It's just that's not true. I think that is the future of religion, church, and spirituality, is what I just shared with you, is that the recognition that we are all uniquely designed. And when you look at things like human design, which you can get your human design chart, or you look at your gene keys chart, which is an aspect of human design. I love these teachings. The gene keys is a teaching of Richard Rudd, and the human design is Ra-O-Ruhu. And when you enter your time of date and birth and your location that you were born in, and it spits you out this data and this map. It's a map of your life. And so it's like the biggest proof there is that you were designed to be this way. So for myself, I look at my map, I see judgment leading to integrity, leading to perfection. And boy, have I had judgment in my life. I see opinion leading to, farsightedness, leading to omniscience, being able to see all opinions as part of one giant disco ball. And so I see myself in my curriculum, I see my soul's curriculum on a piece of paper just like that. And I believe that this is the next stage of human understanding in understanding ourselves as unique divine beings of light that are having an experience of being human on this plane of dimension, and having different tests and challenges. And so all the events that conspire in life are really here for us to learn about ourselves, to learn and grow individually and collectively. So the recognition of that, of who I am, what place are you asking the question, who am I? What place are you saying I am? Are you saying it from the small self? Are you saying it from your bigger self, your eternal self, your timeless self, the self that doesn't die, the self that's just having an experience inside a human body? Where you say I am from is really important on this journey. And it's also important to realize that we're part of a collective. So we all influence the whole collective. It's like we're just one big entity called human. And in human consciousness can actually affect not just our experience of life, but the entire planet. Everything that we think and do and be affects the plants, affects the oceans, affects the mountains, affects the meadows, affects animals and birds and insects. We have that power to destroy this whole planet if we choose, or we have the power to bring heaven to earth if we choose. And the secret of that lies in what brain we're using. Like I said, where are we speaking I from? So if we're speaking I from, my human limited temporary self that thinks I've only got, you know, 50 years to be alive or 100 years to be alive, so I better like get everything I want during that time, and so all my decisions are going to be really short-sighted. They're going to be very self-centered, and they're going to be really short-sighted, and they're going to be based in fear because I think I'm going to end, at some point. So I've got to get mine before I end. That's one way of thinking. And if you're thinking from the I am in a greater space, if you're thinking of yourself as a continuum, as part of an ancestral lineage, as part of a human collective, as part of a project to bring a species to consciousness, to divine consciousness, your perspective changes drastically about the kinds of actions and focuses you would place your attention on. And when you see yourself in that way, the only important thing to you at that point is to elevate your own consciousness, because you realize that in elevating your own consciousness, you are elevating the entire human entity consciousness. And when you elevate the entire human entity consciousness, you make life possible for all other species on this planet. That's what we're doing here. So my message is to elevate your consciousness. The truth is that the strongest energy leads. The strongest energy leads. The strongest energy for the last thousands of years on this planet in the Piscean Age has been force. And this is from David R. Hawkins' work in the book Power versus Force. The strongest energy has been force. It's been fear. And elements of fear and force include shame, blame, guilt, judgment, apathy, grief, regret, anxiety, fear, hate, anger, and pride. Those are all aspects of force, and you can see it everywhere around you, everywhere you go in the human collective at this moment in time. When we look around, we see that in ourselves and we see that in others. There's a lower consciousness. That's the consciousness associated with the reptilian brain, which is the survival brain, and the limbic brain. The limbic brain is the emotional brain. And so most people are trapped in those two brains. And they're living out a consciousness that is derived from the idea I am this limited human being that needs to defend its territory and needs to, protect itself with guns and needs to uh, fend for itself. And there's a zero sum game and there's only enough for me and I can't share because there won't be enough. I got to look out for my family and my country first. That's the consciousness we're stewing in for the last thousands of years. And that is the consciousness that has resulted in 27 school shootings in 2022, including the Uvalde, Texas shooting that just happened, where a young man chose to take the lives of 19 children. And I want to say, this young man didn't do it alone. He did not do it alone. He operated from the strongest energy in our collective consciousness, which is force. That's how it happened. So if we want to stop these senseless killings, if we want to stop war, if we want to have equality, if we want to have a beautiful world and we want to experience beauty in life, the solution is to lift the collective consciousness to love. We must lift the collective consciousness to power, which is love. How do we do that? How do we lift our consciousness to power? How do we lift our consciousness to love? We start by looking at what life is showing us. Life teaches us in every single moment. Life teaches us by having an 18-year-old boy go get basically a killing machine, walk into an elementary school and shoot 19 kids. Life is showing us what we're doing to ourselves. Life is showing us very clearly by that. And we would be mistaken if we thought that was, oh, that's just him. That's just him and his mother and his grandparents, and that's their problem. No, it's us. It's us, all of us. We are the human entity. We are creating the possibility where that kind of thing can happen by lingering in lower consciousness of the reptilian and limbic brains. And so every single one of us, I believe, has a responsibility to do our inner work, to take responsibility when something like this happens or anything happens in our life that life is showing us discordant behavior, discordant results, discordant energy, is showing us fear, is showing us force. It's our job then to pay attention and claim responsibility for it. And then to ask the question from a place of quiet inner contemplation, what is here for me to do, be, process, integrate, speak, act, seeing what I see now? How is this for me, through me, for the betterment of humanity? How is this for me? Because love is action. Prayers are wonderful action. Prayers aren't going to solve this. Lifting our consciousness is what's going to solve this. So let's be specific. How do we lift our consciousness to power and love? We pay attention to what life is showing us. We claim responsibility for it. And we do it by having the courage to talk to our neighbors, unarmed, undefended, with transparency, vulnerability, and curiosity, knowing that I am speaking from the eternal me. I am safe speaking from the eternal me. So I have courage because I'm not trying to protect my temporary existence, although that definitely surfaces as a concern. And we honor that, but we also speak from the eternal self. have the courage to open ourselves to talk to our neighbors unarmed, undefended, with transparency, vulnerability, and curiosity, and thereby facing our fears. We do it by being neutral and unattached to the outcome, trusting that something beneficial results from an open, undefended heart. And being neutral means letting go of our opinion and our position and our perspective, momentarily releasing it to receive something new that we didn't know, that would inform perhaps what we thought. So getting outside of our minds, releasing, letting go, and listening deeply. And being willing to be transformed through the encounter, being willing to be transformed through these conversations, letting them shift us and change us and help us to expand. Maybe it helps us to see 4, 5, 6 more windows in the giant disco ball, get to see more perspectives that influence our current perspective. And by allowing, accepting, and embracing that there's all these different perspectives and there's all these different experiences, we can actually expand ourselves into unity through, not through forced conformity, not through forced structure, but through allowing, accepting, and embracing all that is. These are arts, these are practices, this is self-mastery. We do it by accepting and forgiving what has been as perfect and necessary to the unfoldment of what might be created through the process of letting go of what we thought should be. So I would never, ever in a million years wish for this shooting to happen. And I allow, accept, and embrace that this is part of the isness of our human entity at this time. That this kind of thing is the byproduct of our state of consciousness. That's what is. That is true because we see it happening everywhere. It's the current state of our consciousness. If we had a higher consciousness level in the human entity, that kind of thing wouldn't happen. But we are at a state of consciousness where that kind of thing is happening because we're operating in the force paradigm. Largely, that has the greater energy in our society up until now. And now we have the potential to transform it through the power of our intention, the power of our word, the power of our energy, the power of our own inner work to come to love, compassion, forgiveness, and understanding. And then that makes love the greater power. And that is going to change the results that we see in our society in terms of actions that people take. So we also do it by using our curious minds to listen and understand, allowing our hearts to guide our reason. You know, when we try to solve problems from our minds, we generally get in trouble because the mind is the lower mind. The mind is actually operating from the lower self. It's operating from the small self, from the temporary self, most of the time. And it's also operating from echoes, you know, echoes of rules of conduct of how this should be and that should be, and rules of behavior. There's like a whole book of law that the Toltec talk about in their teachings, and that is explored in the book, The Four Agreements I mentioned. And so when we see ourselves mired in all of these systems of logic and expectation and opinion and rules, and we're firmly lodged in those perspectives, what happens is that it causes, you know, confrontations because we're seeing through different windows on the giant disco ball. So we can't possibly see the same thing. We don't see the same thing. We don't understand another's experience. All we can do is relate to it from our experience. That's all we can do. So that's why curiosity is our greatest asset. Being curious to listen and understand, that is a powerful tool of love. And then allowing our hearts to guide our reason, allowing the heart to lead. The heart is connected to the soul. And so allowing our heart soul to lead the way, to make sense of it all. Because in the soul view of things, these things are lessons. They happen because they're teaching us. They're painful things that happen to teach us lessons, to teach us about love, to invite us to a higher consciousness. And sometimes souls have curriculums that involve manifesting this kind of experience so that we can understand better how we're creating that collectively in the human entity. And we can make a choice around whether we want to keep doing that or not, which I personally do not. Because We need to have a reverence for all of life. This is what power says, this is what love says, is have reverence for all of life. And let unconditional love and acceptance be our foundation. Unconditional love and acceptance. Everything is happening, therefore it is. It's part of the isness. It's happening for a reason. It's happening for a purpose, because the divine is too powerful for anything to not happen, or happen for not a reason. That's bunk. Everything happens for a reason. It's all divinely orchestrated. So when you actually know that, like you know it, like you know it, then your mind flips into like, oh, well, if this is, then it must be so. And if it is so, my next question is, what choice can I make around this? Because we have free will. What choice would be best serving for me to make around this? And the choice that serves us best is to choose to receive grace, serenity, and peace as a state of being, in harmony with ourselves and with others. That's the choice. And to get to that choice, we actually have to practice acceptance and neutrality and courage. And we do this by courageously moving from conflict to peace through all the steps I mentioned here, and finally into diplomacy that honors all sovereign life. So Rumi said, I am not the ocean, I am not a drop in the ocean, I am the entire ocean in a drop. What does that mean? That means that all the children who were killed at all these school shootings and Uvalde most recently, they could have been my children. In some way they are, including the young man who chose to take their lives. He could have been my son, and in some ways he is. All the teachers who lost their lives, they could have been my best friends, and in some ways they are. All the mothers who lost their children, they could have been me, and in some ways they are me. And what happened to the grandmother, that could have been my mother, and in some ways it was. And in fact, when I look at the experience that my family has gone through over the last several months, there are some very similar themes that have been happening in my family that happened apparently in this young man's family that led him to this action. And so, although the details were different, and although in our case the force of love, the power of love was greater than the force of fear, we kept our son in love. There was a tension. There was a collective tension that was causing these patterns to surface in our family. And so we got to choose love or force, and we chose power and love rather than force and fear. I wrapped my arms around my son. I wrapped my arms around my mother. And I brought peace and harmony and equilibrium to the situation by my willingness to be the solution in my family, to take responsibility. That's the invitation that we each have now, because we're not so different. Today it was Uvalde. Tomorrow maybe it will be your community. It's our responsibility. We're part of the one collective human entity. It's part of all of our responsibilities to realize this. Only the details are different. But humanity is slogging its way through fear back to love. That's what's happening at the biggest picture. And so I invite all of you to make it your mission. Give love your will. Surrender your will to divine will. Make the choices every moment of every day that lead to a world where love is the strongest energy for everyone, where there's a recognition of inner divine power and sovereignty. That you don't need to go out and get somebody else's power, because the power is within you. It always has been. And we'll stop a lot of these, patterns that have been going on for thousands of years as humanity has struggled to raise its consciousness, since we had a beautiful teacher, Jesus, and he knew these things. And he knew that we would do that and so much more. And doing it is actually action. Love is action. Love is choice. Love is inner exploration and discovery. Love is willingness. Love is the act of leaning into discomfort to create peace, and diplomacy. So I encourage everybody, let this sacrifice, I see it as a divine sacrifice of children that's been going on. 27 so far this year. It's heartbreaking. Let it break your heart open. Let it crack your heart open. Let it lift your consciousness into love. And don't let their death be in vain. If you feel moved by all of that, how can you not? But if you do and you want to work with me more, you can visit my website, kerrihummingbird.com, Kerri, hummingbird.com. And I have a podcast, Soul Nectar Show. Carl has been on there. We've had a beautiful conversation on my show. That's soulnectar.show, soulnectar.show. And you can also find that from kerrihummingbird.com. I have events, things that go on. I do personal spiritual healings. I lead groups to Peru for pilgrimage to the Holy Mountain, doing that in June. And we go every year. What else? I teach classes. I teach weekly classes on following the Andean path of finding yourself. So there's an ancient path of the Incan, and it's just the path that I found that really serves me well. It helps me to understand the balance of energy and light and dark, and how to integrate your whole being across the spectrum of human experience and divine experience. It's a path that's helped me to understand these things. And I also teach Toltec wisdom. It's another path that's helped me to understand things. So I help people to practice earth-based spirituality because that's the path that has woken up myself to my divine nature and my connection to the planet and all that is and all of you. So that's what I teach. And so if that calls to you and you want to explore more, you can always go to my website at kerrihummingbird.com and book a discovery call. I'm happy to have a chat with you and see how we might work together. So blessings. Thank you so much for being a human being interested in these conversations and opening yourself to love and the exploration of your divinity and being a force of power on the planet. Thank you for your light and your contribution. Blessings to you today.